Thank you. Yes. Okay. So calling the finance committee to order, 7:02. We are hybrid tonight. So we have, we'll have to do votes by roll call. Fortunately, the only votes should be, opening the meeting, approving minutes and adjourning. Let's get started then. Mark.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Emily.
Yep.
Marianne.
Yep.
Jeffrey.
Yep.
Ed.
Yep.
Henry.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
And Joe Kernigan present. So that is everyone. So this is our month as finance committee. We're going to see a lot of each other over the next 4 weeks. It is going to be all 4 weeks, almost certainly. Better not be 5. 4 weeks we should be able to do.
It's 5 though if we have to meet April 2nd.
Yeah. So let's
It's
not.
But I thought that was the hearing where the public gets to talk about the 2 debt exclusion projects.
That's not our. That one's not our fault.
Yeah, I guess it's not our meeting. We have to be there.
I imagine we will be there, but we'll get to that later. I imagine we'll probably even have to post for that. So yes, so we are. We have our sort of standard opening things of we have approximately 0 public. We have a couple folks on Zoom. Actually, we have exactly 1 non-member, non-staff person on Zoom. But I do plan on giving the public the opportunity to comment at each of these meetings. And our third of these 4 meetings is the one that will actually be the official public hearing on the budget. It has to be advertised a little extra. And, we'll have to vote to close the hearing and all that stuff. But yeah, so it has been a while since our last meeting. Tom? I would ask people not to report on everything in their area of their liaison areas, but if there are liaison reports, especially ones that are relevant to the budgets we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks, I would love to hear them. Go ahead, John.
So Recalc has an anticipated total cost of the senior center, community center of just under $28 million, which would include 4.7 for contingencies. That is estimated to add between 190-ish and $265 per year to the average home's property taxes, depending on whether that is over a 15 or 30 year time frame.
We'll be hearing from them at our next Wednesday. We'll be getting presentations both on Recal and Killam. Emily.
Super quick from Jenna and company, the Parker turf is nearing the end of its usable life, so they're gonna look to shuffle some capital at some point in the very near future. I think $18 million, she said?
Ooh.
Something like that? Oh no, I'm sorry, I way misspoke. 18 years old.
Okay.
She didn't have a quote yet.
Okay.
Sorry, that's why I kept the text open, because I knew I would say something wrong.
Yeah, already got enough bad news, but Marianne, go ahead.
I'll leave the Killam stuff to Jeffrey, but in terms of something sort of monetary, as many people know, the select board has been voting on the use of kiosks in the downtown, and they are retaining them for Lower Haven. Upper Haven, they voted not to use them, and there has been talk of selling them. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I have heard, just being on the Melrose Community Board, Melrose is looking to put in kiosks, so maybe we'll have a buyer. So maybe that will be some,
Alright.
I don't know if we'll recoup our expenses, and I don't know if selling them is really a possibility.
I had set up a bidding war. You just can't have Melrose be the only one taking real estate. We need to create some buzz.
Gosh, all right.
Barely used kiosks, you know,
Exactly. No,
like new.
Almost fresh out of the box.
We might have some scorch marks from some of the discussion around them, but anyway. All right. Anybody else?
I was actually not planning to talk because we'll have the school folks here, but since Marianne mentioned the Killam project, that's the MSBA number came in a little bigger than I think the previous number, so $40 million.
Yeah, I
And
have.
do you want to
No, I,
You're on that? Are you- oh,
yeah, I'm on the
okay.
committee.
Between the two of you, I
Yep,
forgot, yeah, Ed's
yep.
the expert,
No,
it's
no,
like,
no worries.
And I didn't know, has this committee met
123
Phil
and
Little
80.
yet, the new interim director of finance for the school?
Not yet. I was hoping for an introduction, but we'll get
Yes,
through
that'll be part of
liaison reports, and that will probably be the very next thing.
So go ahead, Ed, with the.
Similar to what John mentioned for Raquel, on the Killam School Building Committee, we've actually at this point voted on to move forward to the MSBA for and with moving forward with schematic design. Total project budget, this is the, the top line number before any MSBA reimbursement is just under 130, just over 129 million, sorry. As Jeffrey had mentioned, the reimbursement rate for eligible cost has increased. So the anticipated, the anticipated kind of MSBA grant is right around 40 million. And so there's a few, kind of different calculations as far as incentive points that we've earned, that we can earn. And then there's also some other pieces related to IRA incentives as well, that are not part of the 40. So there's some other pieces there that that we can still pursue. But from a logistics standpoint, we go when this goes out to a vote, it's actually at the total project budget level. All of the reimbursements come on after the fact. But when we go to the vote, it's for the total project budget.
Ed, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
I don't want to get well beyond the scope, but has anything at the national level with new policies changed, such as that maybe IRA is going away or different green incentives have, we know that that is in flux, but is anyone taking it, how much of the whole budget is that, if that had to go away?
Yeah.
Is that a big amount?
I mean, I think it's we've seen a couple different, we've done a number of different scenarios and iterations around it. And the tough thing about some of it is that what you'd be reimbursed for either by MSBA or from an IRA perspective ends up kind of, because you work through the cap. You know what I mean? So there's, so you're kind of capped on what you're gonna, you would receive. So some of that reimbursement, you even if it was a bigger number, you're already passed through the, you're kind of eating away at the cap, so you don't get 100% of it. But I think the numbers related to IRA, which would be, and one of the pieces where this is relevant is because there is a geothermal aspect to what we're looking at from an HVAC perspective. It's a hybrid system. But I think the numbers around there, kind of total cost, and I think it was between $1 million and $2 million. It wasn't, kind of a massive number. I mean, still, kind of very impactful.
But it's a lot different than if it were like 10 or 15 million or something. I
Exactly.
suppose.
And I think we'll have, the one thing is from a project management perspective, that they're monitoring that. And I think in all of these discussions and all of these, pieces, we're looking at this from the most conservative, perspective, kind of anticipating that, a more conservative versus a more ambitious number.
If I understood you correctly, you were saying that 129 minus 40, those numbers don't include any the IRA incentives or any of the other federal incentives that
No,
are
it doesn't.
environmentally related and therefore at risk.
And so, but your question is very good, Mary Ann, and it's questions that we asked in the committee, and I, both from the design team and the OPM perspective are all, kind of, I think, constantly inquiring as far as viability, things of that nature. I think one of the questions that kind of came from the committee is that, okay, well, and I think once you're in, I think anything could happen, but I think what everyone has anticipated up and through, kind of last month is that, if the money is encumbered at that point. So whatever that incentive is.
So we beat the changes
No,
possibly?
so I don't think we have yet. I'm saying but I think if you've kind of passed that, kind of threshold, then you're in. I mean, anything.
But that's why we go to the voters for the full amount, in case
Exactly.
it doesn't come through.
Exactly.
We have voters that have agreed, okay, we're willing to take on this full amount.
Exactly.
I guess we'll discuss that more at our meeting, but that's probably the
That's exactly
point that
it.
we'll keep making clear.
Yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Things for RMLD, I'm gonna be very quick. New rates for residential will be up 6%, and industrial and commercial is gonna be up 7%. They also had their annual review for the general manager. He passed with stellar comments, and there was only a little constructive feedback on communication, but that's it. That's all I had for RMLD.
I have a quick question also. Nationally, like I've heard about tariffs on stuff from Canada. Do we get energy? Does RMLD buy from Canada? Is that gonna
I
impact
think
rates?
most of them is within US.
Okay, good. Sure. Thank you.
Plenty of other things will still get more expensive though, but yes. All right, for my part, the Community Preservation Act Study Committee has continued to meet. We're taking our time because we're targeting, we're gonna recommend voting on it at the November 2026 state election. I mean, there'll be congressional seats up too, but they always call it a state election. And so just getting reports right now from the various areas, where, CPA funds could potentially be used. We did affordable housing on Monday this week. I learned a lot. And do recreation next month and so on and so forth. Anything else? All right, on to the main event. School department, school committee recommended FY26 budget presentation. Tom, go ahead. Or one of the Toms, this Tom, okay.
Pick a Tom. And I think Jackie's helping us out tonight too. So, all right, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you, and thanks for having us tonight. Excited to present the FY26 school committee recommended budget. As always, I'll start just by thanking both the FinCom and the entire community for your continued support of the schools. I'll tell anyone who will listen that we feel we're really fortunate in Reading to have a community that deeply values and supports public education. And we feel that reflected both on the finance side and in general of other types of support too. So thank you, as always, for the work that you do, the support that you show for our schools. I'll lead tonight just with I think the two major headlines. Then you can tune out if you want because you hear this. But the two headlines being, first of the budget is that this is generally a level service budget, which for us, we're actually encouraged by, given where we've been the last couple of years, which I'll get into, which have allowed us to have some significant adds. And also, if you look around at some, if not many, of our neighboring communities, they are facing some pretty significant budget cuts and difficult budget decisions this year. I think we're one of the few right now who feel like we're in a solid financial position both for this year and the future. So we're actually encouraged by that statement of us being generally a level service budget. Second headline, there are two ads you'll see in the budget, which we'll get into tonight. One of them we are extremely excited about, which is finally the transition to universal tuition-free kindergarten for our community. That has been a priority for a long time in this community, and thanks to the advocacy of many in this room and others, that is finally a reality in the FY26 budget. So we'll speak more about that tonight. But those are the general highlights to kind of frame the presentation tonight. In our presentation tonight, I will open by giving a little bit of context of where we've been the last 3 years, which, as I shared, there were some ads that I think are important to set the stage for where we are now. I'll then dive into our two FY26 budget additions, the 1.0 kindergarten teacher, and then also universal tuition-free kindergarten, and talk about a few of the things that did not make the cut this year that are priorities for us if there were to be funding available as well. I'll then turn it over to Phil Littlehale to dive a little bit deeper into just the budget by cost center, capital plan review, other funding sources as well. And I think the majority of our time will probably be in questions and conversation. gives me the chance to introduce Phil Littlehale. If you haven't had a chance to meet Phil, our new interim CFO, who's done a really great job since joining us a couple of months ago. Phil has over 15 years of experience in the public sector as a director of finance and CFO. Prior to that, experience in private sector as a CPA as well. I think very quickly we have come to appreciate his expertise, his experience, and what he can bring to our team. So thank you to Phil for all his work, and excited he gets to shine tonight with you all here. So. All right, so we can go jumping right in. As I shared, generally a level service budget, but the last 3 years, we have been really fortunate to add close to 35 positions the last 3 years, many which have been new positions, but also many of which have been positions that have been rolled over from grants onto our operating budget. I'm going to go through these really quickly, and again, just want to highlight for the community sort of the investments that we've made and the impact that they've made in broad strokes. Starting FY23, a 5.0 school adjustment counselor as a METCO coordinator. This is split between our district operating budget and the METCO grant. As you may know, this is prior to this addition, there were not any school adjustment counselors in our elementary schools. I think we can probably all understand that these have been really impactful additions, especially the last couple of years. And we think these roles have been important for not only our Boston resident students, but serving all of our students in every school. Next slide, Jackie. Also in FY23, we also added the 1.0 Director of Academic Achievement, which now has been folded into a new assistant principal role who has taken on these responsibilities and duties. We're starting to see the kind of bearing the fruit of this role, which is now, if you follow along, the high school now have 5 innovation pathways, close to 200 students who are enrolled in our innovation pathways with dual enrollment opportunities, senior internship opportunities. I think that this is something that has changed the high school experience for many of our students. So I think this is a role that not only in grants has sort of paid for itself, but also in a lot of ways, just the impact on our students. Continuing on, Jackie, still in FY23. We added 1.2 staff, 1.2 FTE in our MLL department. We saw in that over that time frame from 2018 to 2023, we saw going from 42 MLLs to 74. As you can imagine, that number continues to increase, and that we needed to make sure we could meet all required services both by DESE regulations and by just what our students need, and also an increase of 0.2 in our Stepping Stones program, which is our program for students returning from either hospitalizations or any sort of out-of-school setting or need, and that moved from a 4-day-a-week program to a 5-day-a-week program. It didn't make a ton of sense to have that program only running 4 days when the needs of our students was really there all the time. Continuing on in FY23, next slide, we increased our counselors at the middle school level through both a school counselor and a social worker in our REACH program, which is our program for students with social and emotional disabilities at the middle school level. Jackie, next slide. And also continuing on with a 1.0 FTE nurse, which that moved our high school nurse to be able to become the director of K-12 health services instead of doing both the dual role of being a nurse at the high school and also the director, and then also a 0.4 district data specialist to better support a lot of the teaching and learning initiatives happening in our district. Jackie, next slide. That brings us, that was all FY23, shifting gears to 24, continued on with an increase in staffing in our MLL department. Continuing to now, I would say in FY24, it was not only an increase in population of our MLLs, but also an increase in level 1 MLLs, which if you look at sort of DESE's regulations about time on learning, minute requirements for our level 1, which are our newcomers, is significantly higher. So adjusting our staffing to be able to better support our MLLs. And an investment that had been discussed for a long time was district K-8 math coaches, which is we think the best type of professional development we can give our staff is professional development that's embedded in their day-to-day work. At the elementary level last year, we had our best student achievement outcomes historically at the elementary level. We think that the math coaches have played a pretty significant role in there. Shifting on, Jackie, to continuing FY20, also in FY24 adding 5.0 elementary assistant principals. Again, a long-standing priority for the community was ensuring that we could bolster up the leadership in all of our buildings, given the day-to-day needs, as you know, of all of our students, not only academically, social, emotionally, parent communication, anything that's, kind of happens in all of our elementary schools. Continuing on in FY24, we also moved from having just our METCO SACs at the elementary level to adding a 1.0 middle school adjustment, METCO SAC at the middle school level, who is now shared between Parker and Coolidge. and a 1.0 one-to-one nurse, which was required for a student medical need, is now transferred into a float nurse across our schools. Continuing on, FY24, a position that is fully funded out of the METCO budget, which is a METCO coordinator at the high school level, not a school adjustment counselor, but a coordinator to support the day-to-day needs of primarily our Boston resident students. And then 2 special education teachers, one at Joshua Eaton and one at Coolidge, to make sure that we can meet, be in compliance with required services based on student IEPs. Continuing on, last on FY24, also additional counselors at the high school level and 2.6 special education team chairs. Jackie, continue on. And then 2 roles were some of the roles that were recommended through our program reviews, through our special education program reviews. If you may remember, each year we've done a pretty extensive, the last couple of years, external review of our substantially separate special education programs. A couple of the top recommendations were around continuing to bolster up our BCBA staffing and also working on hiring a transition specialist who can support our students for their post-secondary goals and opportunities. Shifting on to FY25, shifting again to meet student needs, a speech language pathologist from 0.4 to 1.0, an elementary lead program teacher. This is I know the community's talked a lot about our language-based program, which we feel strongly we can build a stronger program in district. We'll have a much better chance to support the needs of our students with language-based learning disabilities in district. So not only just a way to better support students, but a way as a cost saver as well. And we've been encouraged by the initial returns on that role. And then also a high school admin assistant to kind of match the staffing model in all of our other schools. Continuing on, shifting a couple of roles from the ESSER grant, which as you know, sort of closed out. Those are two FTE secondary guidance counselors and 1 middle school special education teacher, and then a 1-year Pat Parker METCO coordinator. That was fully funded out of the METCO grant, but again, a 1-year position to support some of the student needs at Parker. Okay. So with all of that, I think we wanted to share that context to, first of all, give some color to why we believe that we're encouraged by sort of a level service budget as well, and also to say that we feel that those investments have not only improved the day-to-day experience for our students, but are starting to show and translate into tangible student outcomes that we started to see over the last couple of years. I think most recently this past year. Leads us to the 2 investments this year, or the 2 adds to the budget this year. 1, tuition-free full-day kindergarten. That's always a mouthful. I don't know if it's tuition-free, universal, however we want to say it. I really encourage, if we just go back, Jackie, 1 slide, to give a little bit of a history to the community too. Back to 2020, 2021, we were one of 23 communities across the state to charge for full-day kindergarten. Not a list that we want to be on, and we were second highest tuition at that point, $4,450, which I remember beginning of my time here, a family else saying, I have twins at that age. The $9,000 hit for families is pretty significant for families to be able to, recover from for kindergarten. So I appreciate all of the support from the town to help us find a way to move to a model this year, produce a model which allowed us to get to now $1,450 for this year and then next year tuition free. So thank you to the town leadership. Thank you. Also a huge thanks to Tom Wise sitting right here, who helped us develop a model to help us kind of, ensure that year by year we can move in a more positive direction and do it in a way that is sustainable. And again, really encourage that. Now we'll reduce the burden on families for the upcoming year, and also we think ensure access for all of our families to be able to be in school for that full kindergarten time, which is so formative for their experience. And then second, the next ad, Jackie, you can go next slide, is an additional 1.0 kindergarten teacher. And I'm just going to put like a little asterisk to this, and I'll kind of give some context on why. You'll see the projected enrollment for kindergarten next year is higher than what it's been over the last couple of years, 340. And we calculated that number a little bit differently than what we had in the past. In the past, we've used primarily either census data or the McKibben demographic study, which was done a couple of years ago, to help us project what kindergarten enrollment would look like. Those have been relatively close, the census and the McKibben study, in terms of projection. The projection for FY26 was 313. Now, we moved that number up 27 students because we had 20 students who we knew were eligible for kindergarten last year, who notified us they were holding their child out for 1 more year. They just didn't think their kid was ready. They wanted a little bit more time to develop. We also had 7 families contact us pretty early this year who were not on the census that we said, okay, if we're not accounted for, we want to make sure they're reflected here. So we thought this 340 number would be like the high end of where we would be. If we ended up at 340, we would need an additional kindergarten teacher. At this point, we are at 287, and we've already done our major push to tell families, if you want your priority school, you need to make sure that you are fully registered by the beginning of February. So we think that we found most of the students and the families who are sort of kindergarten age out there. That number could, continue to go up a little bit over the next few months. It also does not include school choice, does not include Metco, but I don't think we're gonna get that 340 number. If we don't, if we kind of stay where we are right now, we can do without this additional 1.0 kindergarten teacher. If we, go in that direction with school committee, at this point, we thought that that money would then go to our non-personnel lines, which we have kind of kept level for the last couple of years to allow us to absorb some of this, what we know are increasing costs in our non-personnel lines. If you want even more detail on this, right now, like our numbers at Barrows are sort of close to being full and capped at Barrows at 3 classrooms for next year. We have a little bit of space still in all of our elementaries, and most of our space are going to be at JE and Killam, where we have sort of the most open space. Happy to talk more about that after too. All right.
If it's 287, that would be like 2 classrooms less then, right? But it's not divided evenly into schools.
Correct. So it's tricky, right? If you're at, say you have, 70 students, right?
Yeah.
That's, you can't really consolidate. That's going to be, you'd be maybe 23 for kindergarten, which is a little bit higher than where we would, have historically been. But so it's not really enough to go down. So you kind of want to fill up to that next level, if that makes sense.
Just a quick question, you mentioned this doesn't include school choice and Metco numbers. So how do you decide how many of those to accept? Is it, we'll accept enough so that we don't have to hire an additional teacher, like to fill?
Exactly.
Okay.
So as an example, right now at Birch, we are at 54 students for 3 allocated classrooms. So we feel like we could add a few students there to still be in a pretty,
But that's how you direct where the student Metco or school choice students would go
correct.
to.
And the largest spot we have now, for example, is we have JE, who is at 66. We could do 3 class at 22. My guess is someone else is going to move into that neighborhood pretty, throughout the next 4 or 5 months. And if that's the case, then what we would do is allocate some of our new Boston resident students, some of our new school choice students, and then get that number closer to 80, which would be kind of a better range for 4 classes at 20. So we do, for those, we have some choice and autonomy over where those students are placed.
Out of curiosity, so there, I don't remember Barrows having an empty classroom that's not being used for anything right now. So what would the, facilities implications be of, having their kindergarten class if we do have to go that way?
That's the $1 million question. I think the principal at Barrows, this guy was like, please, if we have to have a 4th class, we will figure it out. We will, have to change some classrooms around, maybe some of the specials placements we've talked about, maybe some of our separate classrooms. That's why that's the spot we prioritize to say we're going to, trim that number down if we can. So for example, that number was actually at 68. We then talked, there was a few families who had already requested to transfer based off of just like being on the line to another district, having a cousin, and we approved all of those to bring us back down to 62. We're also now told families if they're not registered, we're going to kind of hold tight on Barrows being sort of full. So we hadn't determined where that 4th classroom would be, but it was going to be a big problem, and we don't have it as a big problem in other sites right now.
Thanks.
I'm not going to go through all these one at a time, but these are in the presentation and in the budget book. If you want to look through, these are just either priorities that have been elevated by our own staff, by the community, or by our school committee on things that should be on our radar in the years to come. We haven't put these necessarily in any sort of priority, but we did on many of them try to give an estimated cost so the community could have an idea of what it would look like. If we were in the fortunate position at some point later, on to add one of these, we would certainly collaborate with our school committee and all of our constituents to decide what direction we'd want to go. But at this point, these are sort of a wish list of things down the line as well. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to Phil, who's going to give a little bit break down the budget by kind of an overview first, and then jump into budget by cost center. Jack, you can keep going.
So is this like Siri or somebody behind the scenes?
Yes, Siri, our own Reading Siri. Jack, you can keep going.
Yeah, keep going, okay, that's good. Just a couple things I wanted to say before I start. One is I live in Melrose, and since they're looking at a $7 million hole for next year's budget, I don't think they got the money to buy anything right now.
I know the override failed there last year,
Yes, it did.
but
I
I
could
just
make-
saw on the community page, they were speculating on kiosks, right?
Make money, you gotta spend money.
Not very popular belief, they're not actually a moneymaker, but anyway.
Don't get him going.
You know, when you live in a town that's 98% residential and there's absolutely no space left to build anything on, you know, the reality sometimes comes to get you. Beyond that, that's enough of my editorial comments for this evening. I know I'm gonna do something slightly out of order, and I wanna talk about the small elephant in the room right now, which is, what do we get for federal grants right now? So people have some context for it. So when we talk about the federal grants, we're primarily talking about our entitlement grants, which would be Title I, Title II, Title III, which are actually shared with somebody else, and Title IV, as well as the special ed grants. Right now, the biggest grant we get is special ed, which is the 240 IDEA grant, which for this year is just under $1.2 million. And that grant is primarily used for two things. One is for paraprofessionals, and the other is just for supplies and other needed things within the special ed program. The next one we have is Title I. Title I for this year is just under $90,000. And right now we use that primarily, I don't know if we use it for two paraprofessionals or for one teacher and a para, but it's basically staffing. The other grants that we have are all much smaller. We have a early childhood grant of $20,000 that goes to preschool. We have Title IV, which is all the way up to $10,000. And then we have Title II, which is $43,000. So in total this year, our federal grants are just a little over 1.3 million. Now, if you look at the history of the grants over the last, say, 10 years, for the most part, most grants have flatlined. I mean, you're really not seeing a whole lot of change. If you go back to 2020, the Title I for Reading was 120,000. Now we're down to 90. And that's been the case in all the districts. The amount of Title I money is shrinking and it continues, allocations continue to go down. Special ed, again, is determined by number of students you have in special ed and other factors. So, you know, this year we're up to 1,170,000, which is less than we had in 24, which is just under 1.2 million. And for the most part, it's been around 1,050,000 for the last 10 years. So, you know, again, the reliance on grants, relatively speaking, continues to shrink in terms of the federal grants. There is one other thing, it's not really a grant, but it's the National School Lunch Program. The federal government still, you know, up until 3 years ago, you know, the federal government was paying for all the lunches, and they went back to the way where you have to count your lunches by the categories of students. So for free lunches, you get a very little reimbursement from the federal government. For free, you get more, and then for reduced, you get more, and then for free, they cover the whole thing. And then the state has stepped in to fill in that gap so that we continue to have the lunch program where students don't have to pay. So right now, we get out of the federal program about $250,000 out of the $2 million of revenue that we have. So whether or not that falls under the umbrella of grants or falls into all of the, I'll use the term loosely, funding games going on down in Washington right now, I don't know, but just to give you a sense as to what other federal monies are out there for the school department. Other than that, other grants that we get are one-off grants, and so if they're not existing, you know, we don't rely upon them.
Do you have a plan if, say, the 1 million goes away or most of it goes away?
That makes next year's budget even harder to figure out how we're gonna do it, because again, you know, if the $1 million for special ed goes away, whether or not the state steps in, does something with circuit breaker or something along those lines, I don't know. Of course, we'd have to work with Tom and the teachers to figure it out. I mean, we're talking this year, that thing is funding 32, or is it 24? I've got my numbers backwards. It's funding somewhere between 25 and 30 special ed paras. So, I mean, it's a big number. So, you know, it's on the list right now of things to be concerned about for 27. Have we gotten down into the nuts and bolts as to how we fill it? No, we haven't yet. You know, I want to try to get through 26 first and get that all done and But, we've already been thinking about 27. Even when we talk about 26, it's in terms of how we're gonna be able to sustain what we're doing in 27. We all recognize the funding squeezes that every city, town has every year. We're trying to be cognizant of that and figure out what we can do to make sure we keep those costs contained as best as we can. So, I just want to put that out there in terms of,
Not really a grant, but on the Metco side, for the reimbursement rates, have they been pretty constant or have they changed?
I'm gonna-
over the last year?
Yeah, do you want me to say it? Metco's been level funded the last 2 years, which has been a significant challenge for Metco districts, given the escalation, I would say, both particularly in transportation costs for districts have skyrocketed, and we think a lot of our special education costs have also gone up. So districts are really struggling right now with that being a level funded program. There's been a lot of advocacy. That was actually just an advocacy session with our House and Senate reps the other day at the State House, trying to advocate for a $3 million increase above what is now a $30 million program. So we'll see, but if there is not an investment from the state and Metco, it's going to be really difficult to sustain a lot of the work, both in Reading in our Metco program and also across the state.
Thanks.
Just one last question, and, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Just real quick, it's not a reimbursement, right? It is a grant. It absolutely is a grant.
Okay.
850,000, give or take.
yeah.
A little over
And that's
8,000
always,
per kid.
like, there's always a timing difference too. I guess technically it is a grant, but it's always in arrears or?
No,
No,
No? Or you get it in the same fiscal?
we get it in the same fiscal year. The one that's always in arrears is circuit breaker, which it isn't called circuit breaker anymore. I forget what they're now calling it. So we don't confuse it with the circuit breaker on their income tax returns.
So just to follow up, you were saying, it's two questions, one is quick and one may not be relevant. You said Title I grants are going down, but I keep seeing in our DESI data that the percentage of students that are low income are going up. And usually Title I is in part based on the average income level at the school, right? Like Joshua Eaton was traditionally a Title I school, or Parker was a Title I school, or Killam at different times. But our grant is going down? Is it just because even though the percentage of students is going up, the total number is going down?
No, it's because the availability of Title I funds has shrunk.
Oh, so
Overall.
we're having more need, but we're just getting less
Every,
money,
if you go to any district, I was up, prior to this as Newburyport, every year Title I was doing this.
even
even
though
though
the
the
kids
numbers
are
are
getting
going up.
poorer.
Title I's been an issue for a good number of years now in terms of how much is available in terms of the overall funding. So,
Okay, and the last question, and this may not be pertinent, is we saw that we had to add teachers for MLL. And with the various crackdowns on the borders, do we think we're gonna have not as many MLL students? I don't know if we also get money for that, but you try to think of all, there's so many impacts, like it can be unpredictable. Do we think that it's gonna at least be flat for now, or?
I couldn't tell you whether it be flat or not. All I can tell you is we're budgeting based on what we think will happen, leaving out the noise that's going on out
Do we
there.
get state money to support?
Very little,
Very little?
very little. I think
And-
our
and probably
Title,
no-
Title III is MLL, right?
Yes. Yep.
Title
I
III is
think it's-
MLL, okay.
I think it's about, $10,000,
So that's federal, Title III is federal, no, that's probably
but it's very small.
going away, yeah.
It
Okay.
used to be that there was a threshold to get Title III. When I was at a charter school in Boston, I think the threshold was 100 students. And when we hit 100 students, the grant turned out to be $15,000.
So
So-
that's nothing. Okay, thank you.
So, that's one of the things. So, it's sort of the good news, bad news. The good news is outside of IDEA, we don't rely a whole lot on federal grants. The bad news is there's not a whole lot there for outside of the IDEA grant for federal grant money. So I just wanted to put that out there to put some context around it. So I could try to do the same thing at the school committee to say that, the guidance that we were given was 3.5%. Our budget is 3.5%. So are there any questions? I mean, we did hit the guidance. But, so anyway, we've hit the guidance at 3.5% for the overall. And I'm sorry, I've got two different sets of glasses and the ones I need I don't have with me. So the total that we've come up with is $58,491,591 for the general fund request from the town. What is her name? Sherry, thank you. Next
We're gonna go
one.
to Jackie.
Jackie.
Who's Siri? That's what you're wanting.
Yeah,
Siri.
Jackie, I'm so sorry. So, for this year, for the budget formatting, we're changing a few things up. I wanted to try a couple of different things, but since I got here kind of late in the process, didn't get as much done as I would have liked. You'll notice that in terms of the cost centers, we now have 8 cost centers. I broke out the last one, which used to be the amalgamation of the 4 small ones. It's only because that's the way things are set up in Munis, and there wasn't an easy way to group it all back together. So that's why you see the 4, you see the athletics. Good Lord, I wish I could see that far away.
Extracurricular.
Thank you. Health services and technology, yes. So that's why they're on there. Can you back up, please? So the one thing I want to point out, as you look at, one of the things we added this year were FTEs, which I noticed when I got here, there weren't any FTEs in the budget, except for something near the end of the budget book, which was printed out of DESI's website for your staffing numbers. So worked with our assistant business manager, Kate, to really go in and get our hands around the FTEs to see what's going on. So when you look at this, you're going, well, geez, that's showing an increase of 10 FTEs. Well, we're not increasing, as you know, from what the superintendent said, we're only going up by 1. The reason why you see it here is that, remember, this is talking about the general fund budget. Does not include positions that are being paid for by grants and things like that. So what this is reflecting is that we've had to shift approximately 9 positions off of grants into the general fund budget to pay for them. That's why, we go to the next one, please. This is in your budget book, I believe it's page 27. It shows you in excruciating detail how we got from the numbers that we started with to where we are now. You know, we had 9 paras that we had to move out of the IDEA grant into the general fund. We had a couple positions up in regular ed that should have been down in special ed, so we had some shifting within cost centers up there. Overall, it says it's a 2.1% FTE increase. So one is the kindergarten teacher. The other one is a position that we missed in this year's budget. We missed a position. So it's not really an add to staff. It just wasn't accounted for in last year's budget. And the other 1.0 was a slight rounding change that we had to make. So I really wanted to make sure we got the FTEs in because I want to make sure the public sees the number of positions that are being supported by the budget. And I thought that was something that had been missing in the past budgets. Now, we're going to continue working on that and going forward. But also at the bottom, you can also see that we've also listed the FTEs being paid by the various grants. And again, that was something that I found when I was going through the budget book that wasn't there previously. Just so you can see, you know, I've lived through when I first started as a business manager, every district used to get a grant from the state grant for paying for paraprofessional kindergartens. And it was half. And then suddenly, we all hit the cliff and it went thud, the grant went away, and suddenly I was in Salem and I had 24 paraprofessional positions that suddenly I no longer had funding for. So, I want to make sure that everyone can see, you know, you try to minimize the number of positions that are grant funded because you never know what's going to happen with the grant money. You know, we know that the entitlement grants are there, but what they're going to be funded at, that always is the wild card. So, again, I think it's page 27 in your budget book. Okay, next one, please. So now we're just going by the budgets by cost center. There's nothing really exciting going on here. Again, overall, the overall budget's about, was a 3.5. There's some odd things going on in here. Oh, I wouldn't say odd, but one of the things you want to look at is if you look at regular day, the overall increase, I believe, is
1.63.
What is it?
1.63.
Sorry, 1.63. And I know the question had come up, why were the salaries only about 2.4% for fiscal year 26 when the salary schedule for next year is going up by 3.5? And the reason for that is that we had a lot of turnover this year. So we brought in a lot of new staff members at salary levels that are much lower than what we had budgeted for. And also we had some positions that shifted out of the regular day budget down to the special ed budget. But we also have an increase in some of the offsets that we have. If you look through the budget book, you'll see that the overall offsets that we're planning on using is about 2.4 million compared to about 1.6 and 1.7 that we're doing this year. So we have more offsets that we're using in general ed to cut down on that overall increase. And so that's why I hate offsets, because it really starts to mess around with the numbers, especially if you look at facilities. Facilities says that your budget's decreasing. Well, that's because we're using more offsets. One of the things that we've changed for this year is we are charging off part of the custodial staff's time that they use in cleaning out the cafeterias after lunches. We're now charging that to the the lunch program. Same thing for, we're also charging off some para time. The lunch para time is also being charged off to the school lunch program. The reason why we can do that is right now the school lunch program, starting this year, had an overall balance of about 1.2 million coming in. And there is a rule that's out there that you're not allowed to have a balance that's higher than 4 months worth of your average revenue. So we run a $2 million program, which is $200,000 a month, which really means our balance should never be higher than 800,000. So not that I'm an advocate of bringing that down, but it does allow us some more flexibility in terms of what we can use it for. But also talking about the food service program just for a moment, it also allows us to do some capital expenditures as well. You know, we're going to be replacing some of the ovens coming up in a couple of the schools as well. So the food service program has really benefited from the fact that the students don't have to pay for lunch anymore. The number of students who are utilizing the service is up, and the more students we have who utilize it, the better we can spread out our fixed costs. So, okay, next one. Sorry, okay. So this is administration. I'm not gonna spend any time on these because there really isn't a whole lot going on other than special ed. So if we go to the next one. So if we talk about special education, as you know, the biggest challenge in special education continues to be out of district tuitions. If you look at the last 3 years, for fiscal year 26, OSD came in, I think it's a 3.69 or a 3.89 for fiscal year 26. And so if you look at the last 3 years, you look at the 14% that they did in 24, I forget what this one is, but over the 3 years, out of district tuitions approved by OSD have gone up almost 25%. And so that's been a challenge for all districts in terms of trying to cover that. The other wild card that we have in special ed is transportation. Transportation costs are just out of control, regardless of where you go. There's not a whole lot of competition out there, and even the bus companies that are out there have a difficult time getting drivers, and that's just driving up costs across the board. So we're, again, I think we're up to about 1.3 million in transportation for special ed, which is up about $500,000 over the last couple of years. And that's going nowhere but continue to go up. All right, can we go to the next one? Again, for regular day, you know, again, most of the money regular day goes into salaries. And I talked about the reason why the increase looks a little lower than it is. So we're good with that. We'll go to the next one. Athletics, there's no change there. You know, we are keeping athletic fees unchanged for the upcoming year because I believe you folks, they went through, was it last year, a review of all the fees. So there's no need to go through that for 26. Okay, we have the next one. Extracurricular, again, nothing there. And the next one. Health services, its overall change is 7.5%. That's primarily driven by staff increases. We have a lot of, our nurses are still on step and column, so they're still going up a step. And they're also then getting the 3.5% on top of that. So the average increase for the staffs, for the nurses this year was about 7% on average. And then finally, the last one, which is IT. Nothing much going on in there. I have had conversations with the superintendent about making a budget change. Right now, we don't budget explicitly for technology replacement. So what we've done historically, at least for the last number of years, is we wait till we get to the end of the year and see what's left, and then we go out and do our replacement cycle. I want to start doing an explicit budgeting for that within the budget itself, because we know technology is an expense that's going to stay there. You know, a lot of our equipment right now is about 4 years old, so it's reached the end of its useful life. You know, 4 to 5 years is what you're going to get. So we've got to start planning for that. And next.
Facilities.
Oh, and facilities. So facilities look strange again. The reason why is the offsets are going up again, as I explained. We're charging off some of the custodians' time to the food service program. And the next one. capital plan. So I don't have a whole lot to say about this other than that. We're looking at perhaps making some changes to that. For example, we have some money on there for food service improvements. We might be able to fund those out of the food service balance that we have, which then would allow us to free up some money, hopefully to change some more capital for IT, because we do have some big IT expenses coming up that we're gonna need to be focusing on. So we need to do some more review of this and fine tune that going forward. But it is nice to see how much is already out there. Next. And other funding sources. So this is the offset summary. And you'll see as I said, I believe that first column says it's like 1.676 million. And then we're going up to 2.3 or thereabouts. It's about a $600,000 increase. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. So it's a $600,000 increase in our offsets. Half of that is coming from what we're charging off the food service. And most of the other is coming from an increase of what we're going to take for an offset out of the RISE program. The question has been raised, can we afford to do that? The answer is yes. RISE started this year with a balance of about 500,000. Our revenue for this year is going to be about 500,000. We've only budgeted to use 350,000 as an offset for 25, which means we're going to end the year with about 600,000 as a balance. And so next year we're going to plan in 26 to use 500,000 as offset. Basically, we're going to use as our offset going forward what we're taking in that year pretty much for revenue. And so that's the other big change that we have on there. The other one, talking about full day kindergarten balance. Again, we're still following the plan is that it will slowly go down to zero as we use that to help support the elimination of the tuition that we've had over the last couple of years. I think I may be able to squeeze an additional year out of that, given how things are going. So I'm hoping we can do that. Okay, next one. Special revenue funds, nothing exciting there. The next one. Again, this is just a recap of our federal and state grants. We've talked about the entitlement grants. We've talked about MEDCO. There's a whole lot of other one-time grants or that the district has done a very good job of going after. You can see where we are with those, and we continue to apply for lots of grants, which is nice to see. Next one. And I think, is that it? Yes, that's it. Any other questions?
I'm sure there are questions. I know this group. Who wants to go first?
He
I put
answered
in
my
some
questions
questions
right
when
up
we
front.
went to the school committee meetings.
Yes, okay.
So I just trying to find the table. So on the administration, so the administration cost center summary, it went up by 5.3%, and most of it is driven by the professional salaries and clerical salaries. Are these positions unionized or no?
Non-union,
So non-union, just they got a 6.5% increase over the prior year.
I wouldn't say it's all 6.5%, but generally, it's one of our most challenging cost centers to make sure we keep the right people in, for the company included.
And the other one that I had was, there was a line here, was kind of strange. On the regular day cost center, there is a line for technology, I believe.
So that's classroom technology.
So this is on the other expenses line. So other expenses line, there is a technology line. For 2022, it was 732K. For 2023, it was 363,000. And then up to FY24 actual is 400K. And you are budgeting for it only 136K.
So,
Those numbers are kind of wacky, so.
well, yeah, because I'll have the superintendent correct me if I get this wrong. A lot of the numbers you see for technology reflect those year-end purchases where we get to the end of the year is we see what we got left. Because right now you're comparing the actuals that we spent to what we've budgeted for. If you go back and look at those budgeted numbers, they're going to be more in line with what we've budgeted for. So what historically the district has done is go get near the end of the year and say, what do we have left what do we need to do? And then they go out and they have spent a lot on technology over the last number of years. So that's why you're seeing some
So
wacky
is that
lines.
an approach that you wait until the end of the year and you say, well,
That,
we have this bunch of money, let's
Yeah.
just spend it, or is it
that goes back to the statement I made earlier where I want to explicitly put into the budget real numbers for technology. So that we're not waiting till the end of the year. So that, the technology folks aren't sitting there in June, suddenly they gotta go and put a lot of orders in so we can utilize the funds that are there. I want to have a more orderly process to it. So that it's explicit in the budget and we're not playing, I don't want to say game, but we're not doing this end of year, run around trying to get that stuff done. I just think it makes more sense to get it explicitly in the budget.
Go ahead, Mary.
Can you go back to the slide with the special revenue funds, the revolving funds?
I can't, but can,
It was one of your last ones. You kind of said, oh, there's nothing to see here, but I thought I saw some things to see here.
here, let me do this.
Yeah, I mean, I can ask you right from. So one of the things I see here, and maybe it's nothing, right? So extended day program,
The extended day program.
it shows FY '24, almost 500,000 at the beginning of the year,
Yep.
F '25, 163.
Yep.
And then it lists it as a loss of 335.
Correct.
And I'm sure there's a reason why it's expressed that way. I just want to know, is extended day running at a loss? Did we have too much money and we bought a bunch of stuff to spend it down? Tell me the story behind those numbers.
So the story is, the story is, there was a waiting list for students to use the program. So last year, because they had a large amount in the bank, so to speak, they went out and they bought some additional programs to, one, open up space so that we could get rid of the waiting list, as well as try out some programs. Obviously, we overspent because we ended up spending about 2 million, but the revenue was only 1.6 million. So that brought down the balance in the account from over $500,000 to 165,000 at the beginning of this year. I've been working very closely with the after-school program folks to make sure that we get the program to break even this year. Because again, we want to make sure that we can service the kids that are looking for the use of the program, but also want to make sure that we do a better job of matching up what we're going to offer in the expenses for those things. Last year was an experiment that, from my perspective, probably didn't go as well as we would have liked it to have gone. So this year, I've already met with the folks a couple of times, and they're already prepared. They're going to have to cut back on some of the outside programming they were thinking of doing because the revenue is still not going to support that this year. So we're going to get that program back to break even.
So I guess I'm not understanding. Extended day, I had always thought there was.
No, it's after school.
So, extended day is not the same as after-school program. I know the after-school used to be if your kid was in elementary school, you could pay and take,
Yeah,
Same program.
magic science or whatever.
yeah, that's what
Then
it
there's
is.
extended day, which is like kind of the daycare, which I always thought we had a wait list.
This isn't daycare.
Not daycare, but you know what I mean, like after-school care for
It's
parents who
elementary
work.
after school care.
Okay,
Or before school care,
right.
right? So to his point, I wouldn't characterize the same way that Phil did necessarily. I would say, we made a conscious decision to open up more spots when we were significantly oversubscribed. And the way to do that was to offer additional programming through other outside providers. Things like Sports Zone and whatnot, right? Multiple other types. That did mean, at the time, we thought the overall balance was too high. So there was a spend down to bring the balance down. Maybe it's slightly more than we should have, but I wouldn't say it was like egregiously wrong. Now it's a matter of how do we keep it to a balance that is reasonable going forward and still offer the services we need for that program.
Okay, so I guess I just didn't know, we had so many kids and we didn't have enough providers, so we
That's
brought.
absolutely the problem. We had ways, we could not meet the demand from a child perspective at that point in time back in 2024. We had a pretty large wait list.
Right.
I wanna say like 80 kids or something, something large like that, right? And we didn't have the turnkey staff or programming to say, okay, I'm gonna hire 5 more staff at one of each school, and that means I can bring in 16 more kids per school or anything else. So the means to do that was then to say, okay, outside providers that potentially could do like karate for a day or computer programming for a day, that would allow us to do additional adult supervision on a program during extended day, would then also help to bring the balance back to where it should be, because it's one of those things that you shouldn't have the balance out there for too high.
So, I mean, at the time you hired them, you knew they cost more than the teachers, but were you hoping that you would get some like regular extended day kids to sign up to help pay for the cost, and that didn't happen?
No, it was to fill the 80 kids, the
Okay.
80 kids that we mentioned. to be
So,
able to
so
bring
is the
them in.
solution this year to not have as many kids so that they match the teacher?
Ultimately.
I mean, those are some of the things that we're thinking about right now, but the challenge is, like, we have a lot of families who, like, I'll give an example of a program like SNL. There's a lot of kids who, like, love the work that SNL is doing, and that's brought, like, a lot of excitement and a lot of opportunity to some of our schools too. So I think where we are is just figuring out for the future, do we offer more programs that we think are gonna be able to bring in more kids and be able to kind of get us in a better financial position, or do we have to trim back? And I think those are, still decisions we haven't really made on certain programs yet.
It's a
Okay.
constant supply demand matching.
Yeah, as long as this was like a one-time thing and not an ongoing, and I guess,
I mean, Marion, just so we're clear, right, you probably remember this right before COVID, we had this exact same problem. Almost exactly the same problem. Right before COVID, we were way oversubscribed. We went out and had to do some bidding. Many of the same companies bid at that point in time, helped us bring the numbers down from outstanding demand perspective, but also from a, financials in the account perspective. Here comes COVID, and, there's other things that happen and drives up certain things, and we have to balance it out back again.
okay, and I think you addressed this a little bit with the reallocation of custodians, is that the school lunch program, made money and now we're reallocating things, but why did it make so much money in its revolving account? Why
State
did,
gave us a lot of money.
okay,
Because the program
we
is,
didn't spend we didn't need to spend it on food, we just had more than we needed?
We do a great job with food, actually.
Yeah, we do.
A really great job.
in the food service program is like any, you've got fixed costs, and once you get your fixed costs, the more you sell, you're spreading out your fixed costs. The only expense you're incurring would be your variable expense for the food for that meal. So if you look at how the program's running, the participation rate has gone up considerably, so we got more kids eating. So it's increased our, I hate to say it, but our profit margin has gone up. So it's a very well-run program.
Yeah, I was trying to understand that, cause the lunch is free, so what are they paying
It's free
for?
to the kids, but the
Yeah.
millionaire tax
Yeah,
is coming from the state to provide a significant amount. That's the primary thing millionaire tax is currently doing, is providing the free lunch for kids.
One thing I'll add on that, Phil, too, is like you're pointing to our numbers continue to go up. In 2022, we served about 60,000 meals. And then in 2024, we served about 88,000 meals. So like we're on.
and we have fewer students probably, but we're serving more meals.
Slightly fewer.
So if you, but our staffing hasn't really gone up that much in that same time period as well, so, you're getting the benefit.
Yeah. Gotta
So-
get them to run the extended day maybe, because have cooking classes, combine it all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question on the extended day program? Every time I hear a wait list, I think about there is a demand for it. So that clearly there is a need from our community for that type of program. So my question is, what is the plan going forward? I would love to hear that there is no waiting list for this, but is that feasible? Does it cost money? What's preventing us from not doing it?
Yeah, so I think actually, I just had this conversation with Chris Nelson, that the waiting list already for enrollment for next year's actually is pretty, the wait list is pretty small. We think we'll be able to trim that down. So we feel like as of next year, we believe we can, remove a wait list with kind of the current model. Now, we also have to be mindful of just what the cost to run the program would be on that too, but it is that balance of trying to ensure we have no wait lists, but also ensure that we can sustain the programs too. But as of now, looking at the numbers, we should be in a position next year with no wait list. And I think part of this, the challenge for us too was when we talked about, we made an effort to say, we want no wait list. Like, we have to build more programs. We're not okay with having a wait list of 80 kids. There's a demand from families, so we're gonna do whatever we can to build out more programming. I still think that's probably we'll do as much of that as we can.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's always it's a supply and demand conversation, right?
Right.
How do we meet the demand whether it's external programs, whether it's more staffing, what does that mean from an expense perspective? What does that mean from how much we charge the family? And if we charge families too much, the demand may go down. It's a constant economic thing, right? So all of that is the balance that the district's working through.
My other question, is this, was some extended day or?
Yeah,
So I see what the fund balance line that Marianne was asking about, I found that. Is the amount, I mean, you mentioned that, spent 2 million, got 1.6 million in, you can infer the size of that gap from the change in the fund balance. But is that 2 million in here anywhere, or is that?
No.
No, because it is being funded out of
Yeah,
revolving funds.
as it gets back to, and I think Mr. Wise had mentioned in terms of trying to improve our budget or better the budget book by making it more comprehensive. Again, what we're focused on here is the general fund budget, because that's what you folks, or, the town meeting approves.
Town meeting didn't allocate those $2 million,
Yeah,
so.
because this is an
Strictly
outside
speaking,
program.
That's not part of what town money votes on.
Yeah, it's a revolving account, special programs. It is, in theory, a self-funding program. Just like your school lunch program should be self-funding. Because if anything, the only time that it affects the general fund is that if it turns out that they do have a loss, then you've got to get money from the general fund to plug the hole. And we never want to go there.
We haven't in recent.
Yes, I know. If you look at, food services run very well for the last 20 years, as well as the extended day after school. I'll call it wrong for,
The closest we had was extended day during COVID, where we
Yeah.
had to make some cuts at that point in time.
Joe?
Yeah, so I think you kind of addressed this, but for the regular day cost center, the detail, so teachers are up, say, 2.4%, but next year you need 3.25, right, for the contract? Is that right?
Contract wise, I think it's 3.5, as the, is that the COLA, right, off the top of my head, and I think Phil, you mentioned.
3.25.
Is 3.25? Okay, so 3.25. But I think what Phil mentioned before is
The turnover?
it's turnover related, right? So
Okay.
if you have somebody that's going out that's off the steps and they're up higher, and then you replace them with somebody on step 4 or step 5, the difference is pretty significant.
Is there any risk, the replacement costs of new teachers coming in could be coming in higher too? Or, I know you can't control that, but it's,
We technically can, but we,
Yeah.
go ahead, Tom.
Well, at a minimum, the teacher's required to have, by DESI, regulations, are required to have a mentor, which you have to pay a certain stipend for, which is, say, a couple of $1,000s on that. But you would also argue that the training, the professional development, all of, that support is probably a pretty sizable investment too. Harder to quantify than just the simple, teachers, the additional stipend for mentorship.
But I think he was asking about whether we cap, what level we bring people in at as
So,
replacement cost or something like that.
We budget every year for replacement being a master's 7, right? But there's a lot of positions where I would say, in some positions are really hard to fill positions where you're getting people generally higher. I would say school psychologist positions are really difficult to fill, and you're generally getting people above a master's 7. I would say in some of our other positions, you are getting 80 to 100 candidates, and finding a bachelor's 1, you can make up some pretty significant ground there too. So I think the constant conversation with principals is we want to bring the best possible candidate that we can, and be really mindful of what the cost is going to be on the district budget too. And we, if there's going to be going over that master 7, those are conversations that we have, internally too. But there were some positions where if you look at our salary table, where you look at sort of the trade-off of a bachelor's 1 versus a, far, bottom right of the scale. I mean, you're talking, $40,000 generally of, potential swing there too, so.
and then 2 years, it'll just be more of a challenge, right? Because it will bump up again, right, to 4% or something, is that right?
Correct. So do you want to, I guess that's also a good question. Joe asked us before, and I'll let you take first piece at is, what are we doing to ensure that FY27 is sort of as stable or sustainable as possible? I don't know if you kind of want to talk about some of the things that we're doing now to position us.
I was considering retiring, but.
Saves money.
Well, it depends on how you calculate the return on your investment. So, one of the things is when you look at it, if you go between a 3.5% and 4% overall increase, if you look at just on the teachers right now, our teacher base is around, I'm going to round up, call it 35 million. So for, 1% of 35 million is $350,000. So if it's from a 3.5, we have to budget for 4, that's $175,000 differential that we got to figure out how we're going to cover it. So, overall, is it a big number? Yes. Is it gone to the point where I have to violate one of my guidances, which is I don't like making promises I can't keep? The superintendent and I have had many conversations already talking about the 27 challenges and what we need to do, and we need to look at it again, and hopefully we get the turnover savings that we've been getting, and the special ed out of district comes back at it where it's been historically prior to 3 years ago around 2% as opposed to 4 or 5%. That saves money as well. The other challenge that we have for 27 is we really have to look at our non-personnel costs or what we're budgeting, because those things have been flat for at least 3 years now. And we really need to look at that because there's some things that, we need to look at in terms of what we need to buy. So, and then we get the technology refreshment and all that. So like any budget year, there's always challenges. But as the superintendent said, we are fortunate that we're not in the position like a lot of other districts are right now where they are trying to figure out how they're going to pay for their budgets. Reading has been very fortunate. And from personal perspective, my opinion, those districts that manage their ESSER funds well are having less of a trouble in terms of coming back to life without ESSER. If you put too many positions in ESSER, a lot of districts have had trouble with that cliff. And
We gotta manage that cliff now.
yeah, if you manage the cliff, everyone's going to get a cliff. Whether it was going to be like this or like this really depends on how you managed it. So, that's my personal opinion. So anyway, we've got some challenges for 27. We know we're already talking about them in terms of strategies and things like that. We're just going to try to position the district as well as make sure the town we get positioned as well as we can to take on 27. But got to get 26 approved first, and then we go from there.
I would think just ending a couple things on, like he mentioned, ending 26 strong. A couple things are focus areas for us are continuing to invest in our special education reserve fund, which will allow us to have sort of an additional, fund in case of, things really go awry with, unsuspected out of district or special ed costs in general. 2, continuing to prepay as much as we can. As you know, we can prepay for a lot of our special education programs for up to a quarter of the tuition, and so continuing to prepay as much as we can at the end of FY26 is really important to us. And also continuing to, as much as we can absorb, build up our school choice fund as well, which gives us a little, kind of some discretion over how we use those funds. That allows us to, kind of be a little bit more thoughtful for FY27 too. So that piece about, FY27 being concerned, there are things that are on our radar here at the end of FY25 to try to position ourselves to absorb that.
Go ahead. Just a shifting a little different conversation on your capital plan. On FY29, there is 475K for vehicle barriers for all schools. Is that a repair or is that a brand new one? So that sounds like a
The final
safety.
step of the overall security plan that was executed about 4 or 5 years ago.
Some of the big barriers about in front of the school building, which would prevent, a vehicle from being able to move in through the front lobby area.
We don't have that yet.
Not in all
That
places.
sounds like a safety, but I would say, yeah.
That's why it's there.
It sounds it's a safety.
You want to advocate to move it forward, we're talking about it.
Every time I see stuff like that, I'd say do it earlier, but that's just me personally.
Thank you.
So actually, on the capital plan, my understanding is that the lighting system in the Parker Auditorium failed.
It did.
So, and that's a significant capital item, isn't it?
It is.
Are there plans to replace that?
Yeah, so I was actually first of all, the lighting system did go down a little bit earlier than we had anticipated. We knew it was sort of on the end of its useful life, which is a challenge right before the Parker musical, so I just wanted to have it too. Joe Huggins, was actually just texting me a few minutes ago about the capital plan. He said he's happy to jump on and answer any more details. So do you want me to can I phone a friend on that and see if he?
Sure.
lighting failed, like the lights don't work at all, or the lighting?
Essentially, yeah, that you can't have assemblies, never mind, a drama production where you want to control it, but like the lighting control system was.
Hey, Joe, we are gonna take you up on your services here with a question. So I don't know if you wanted, it was around sort of the Parker, auditorium lighting system going down. Do you wanna hop on Zoom or do you want me to put you on speaker?
Okay, we got the email about it, like.
Can everyone hear him?
Yeah, we can hear.
Everyone can hear you, Joe, so I think you're good.
Alright, go ahead.
Well,
So, Jeffrey, do
Put
you
him at
want?
the microphone.
Yeah.
bring him closer, I was like to say, I don't know if Mark
You can
can
do
hear.
a little owl.
We do have one member on Zoom.
All right, so the question was around sort of the Parker system, right, going down earlier than we had anticipated, and how we're gonna be able to absorb that in the capital plan.
So the lighting system that is in the Parker auditorium, we started having problems with it a couple months ago. We've had some repair work done to it, and right now the capability for dimming and to do performances in there is unavailable. So next week we're gonna have, actually it's on the 11th, we're having our electrical contractor come in to bypass the lighting control panel, and so that they can regain use of the space for like speakers, classes, and things like that. We're also engaged, our house doctor contract has an electrical engineering firm to come out and look at the current system and to spec out a replacement for it. I don't know the final where it's gonna land as far as like the total cost to do this. But what we first need to do is identify, first of all, what we have right now is all running on incandescent lighting over there, which is an older technology. The new systems they have out there mostly run on LEDs, so there's a big conversion that has to happen. So what I'm hoping to have in the next month or two is some sort of number that I can give to Sharon to figure out where we, what the dollar number is. I would imagine it's gonna be well north of $200,000 to do this.
Follow up? Any other capital
I
plan
mean, so
questions?
we're trying to obviously put that in so that Parker could have their auditorium back next year, right? So that would be, it's not like, at the end of the 5-year plan, 5 years from now, we'll get an auditorium back, but how do we squeeze that in for next year even, or over the summer, right, Joe?
That's correct, but like right now, we don't know enough I need to be able to give Sharon an accurate number on that. And to do that, I need to do, we have a lot of work to get done before I can actually request the money and then make it happen. So, the hope would be to have it back up and running for the start of next school year. I just can't give you guys an answer right now if that's gonna happen.
It's a high wire act. Yep.
So is there some capital project in our plan, I don't know if this is the town manager decision or superintendent decision, that can be shifted or delayed, that's kind of like on a repair cycle but not urgent, carpeting or some other thing that this can bump up ahead because it's failed so soon?
There might be, and I could have that discussion with Sharon, but like I said, the biggest issue I have right now is I don't know what exactly that number is.
What you're trading out.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't,
And
you don't
I
know.
wanna be sure, and when I request capital, I think you guys all know this, I always make sure that I come in with a real number, and that's the goal, to come in with a real number on this thing, so. But we have been working on it, it's taken up a lot of time trying to, figure out a way to convert what we have there using the existing wiring, remove the panel, and then do the upgrade to it. So we are working on it. I just don't have a final number as to what could be switched out. I do have a few ideas of what possibly could be switched out, but that's really a Sharon, what the capital plan can withstand is really her and Matt.
No more Parker roof money left.
Right,
No,
yeah.
the irony.
But Joe, that prioritization.
They were joking that there's no more Parker roof money left.
It was waiting because it knew.
With the Parker wiring.
I think Joe McDonough had a question
Yeah,
too.
like, so that prioritization though it's not just within the school, it's school plus town, right?
Yeah,
Like,
correct.
the school's not locked into just 280 capital, it could be more or less, right?
Right,
So,
maybe there's gotta be something somewhere in the budget that is not, urgent if something has completely failed.
We all, I mean, at the end of the year, we'll see what's available too. It doesn't mean it has to be anything
It
rapid.
just came up, we had to, not to bore you with the details, but we actually sent the panel itself down to New Jersey to get worked on. The company that made that panel is long gone out of business. We found a guy in New Jersey that still works on it. He bought a lot of spare parts from the company Strand before they went out of business.
No.
And we thought we had the Hail Mary and it didn't work.
Ah.
So believe me, we've expended some money on this thing trying to salvage what we have just to get us over the hump, you know what I'm saying? So
It's tough to do while
We appreciate the resourceful effort, even if it didn't work out.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Any other questions for Joe?
It's too bad RCTV were giving up their studio, they don't have like lighting. Like-
Joe, thank you for jumping on too.
I know.
Yep,
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
I'm here if you guys need me.
We'll try to leave you alone.
Yeah.
We'll try.
We'll talk
Thank
to
you for jumping in.
One time.
All right, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks for the town budget, so. All right, other questions on the school budget?
More just,
Please.
I know you think about these things all the time, but like on special ed and school, transportation, trying to take more of that stuff in-house. I know you've had discussions on that over the years, but Yeah.
So, I mean, you wanna.
I'm just saying like it keeps going up
Well, I
and
mean,
just,
you think-
I know it's easy for me to
Yeah,
ask, but yeah, so.
We have had conversations about busing for the regular district as something we'd wanna do, but it didn't make any sense in the last conversation we had.
Can I follow up?
Special ed becomes even less sense because many times it's almost a one-to-one case going to a specific school, right? You pick up one kid, you deliver that one kid. So, you know, unless we had a fleet of 20 or 30 vans and 20 or 30 drivers to pick up one kid and drop him off, then pick him up the other day and bring him home, it doesn't, the financials don't make sense.
It's a capital intensive business and you have to be of a certain size to do it. And we're nowhere near that size. So that means now we're at the mercy of, you know, the companies that are out there.
But is there any like way to do synergies like with other close, I don't know, Woburn or another close
Well, you know,
town or-
we're part of the SEAM, and so in fact, there's a meeting coming up, I think it's next week, to talk about some of the transportation that SEAM is providing. So yeah, there is some of that synergy going on, but again, you know, it's tough out there. There aren't a lot of vendors, and one of the things that we're seeing within transportation is there's been a consolidation of transportation companies. You know, NRT, and a number of them have been bought up by Vanpool, and it's under the heading of what is the, it's a big company. So a lot of the local companies have been bought up. They're still being run under their old names, but they're now owned by what was originally Vanpool out of Central Mass. That, you know, they're trying to turn themselves into, this company's trying to turn itself into the next first student. So, you know, there's even less competition. I went out to bid up in Newburyport last spring for our bus contract, and our current provider had also been bought up by the same company. So I wasn't gonna get a bid from both NRT and my current provider because they both have the same parent. So now I got one bid. So, you know, that's what we're running into.
It's like the trash
I was gonna
consolidation.
say, it's exactly like the rubbish consolidation. You're running into a monopoly to a degree. Yeah.
That's what I've read about with the fire trucks, why they're costing us so much money. There's only a few nationwide companies now.
Literally 2 companies in the US that make fire
And
trucks,
so
so
there's
like,
4-year
if you don't like
waits.
the one and you don't get the other, then, you know. Yeah, Beacon Mobility, is that the name?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Beacon.
I just didn't
Yes.
Google for the win there.
If you're very interested, go in and see if you can get a hold of their financials. They're a very leveraged company.
Oh, boy.
They got a whole lot of debt on their balance sheet because they have bought a lot of companies over the last 3-4 years.
Joe, I still think in the special education piece is still for us is build the best in-district programs that we can have. And that's our best way to keep costs
And
down.
And that's worked
And
over the last few years.
And it's worked, especially I would argue in our elementary lead program. I would say that also if you build the program up, not only do you have should you be able to keep, you know, kids in who you should be able to service, right? But also you may be able to tuition students in. We actually had a student from a neighboring district tour one of our schools this week for one of our separate programs. So if you can keep kids in and potentially tuition in, but that's all predicated on having a model, a good strong model for your separate programs.
I'll go back to a word we've used from this room many times, or a set of words, invest to save. How many times have we talked about that in this room? We've been very, very strong at that.
Do we expect like a lot of the earlier identification in kindergarten will at least reduce more out of district placements, and even if they have to start getting services earlier, it's gonna save on an out of district placement where we've
That's
can't
what-
service them or have failed them or something.
What Dr. Milczewski just referred to, that's where our lead program is really starting to kick in well. In case you didn't see it, we had a really strong review of the lead program recently, top 5% in the state, so.
Cool.
Do you, I don't want to say actively recruit, but are like other districts coming to you or parents from other districts? Like how do like you network that or,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. I know I'm asking.
Yeah, so a couple, I think, couple things. One is we were very intentional saying, let's talk about our lead program for a minute. We didn't think we could go out and start like actively marketing our program until we felt really strongly that our program was one that was, we would, could put all of our weight behind saying this is a top tier program. Having the evaluation from MGH, who is, kind of one of the leaders in the field, say that we are, he said one of the, top 5%, 95th percentile programs in the region was the language. That's encouraging for us, and they broke down a lot of the ways that they think make us a top tier program. Having them sort of having that evaluation, I think allows us to then say, okay, let's, leverage this to be able to market our program. We did just put out a video that you may have seen floating around that with Dave Cartoon from Cartoon EDU. It's about a 10-minute clip that highlights our LEAD program. And we blasted that out sort of on social media. We blasted it out to our families. And that has started making its way around some of the the parent special ed groups across the state. And we think that sort of has been a strategy for us to market. We do also connect with all of our local special ed directors too. So our director of special ed says, hey, we feel really confident in our program. Here's some information about our program. Here's a review we got. If you have some students who could benefit, let us know. And then also we do feel like obviously word of mouth too. So it hasn't really been until the last couple of months where we've had, I think more tangible strategies around marketing our program, because we didn't have that review from LEAD until recently. But it's definitely forefront of our mind
I'll
now.
add to it, things like we held an event in the fall for the Right to Read film, and we had probably half the people in the audience were not Reading people.
Okay.
And we had a couple people come up to us at the end of it asking about what would it be like to tuition in to Reading. It wasn't even a thing on dyslexia technically, but because of the conversation and the forums and whatnot, they were impressed with what we were doing, so we'll see.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Guess we're all set.
Comments or questions?
We have to take a vote now?
No, we're not, we don't.
Oh, we do it all
they
at
don't-
once.
It's
I have to go back to the
the-
start of
the,
the agenda.
in a few weeks, we'll vote on, one line for the entire school budget as part of
Right,
the overall budget.
I just
But
wasn't
the
sure
fact
if
that they
we
give us
were-
all this details is strictly a courtesy, which we appreciate. But we don't vote on any of the details.
I know, it's just been, I just couldn't remember the procedure if we had any now.
Yep, so, all right, okay, well
Thanks,
then.
guys.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you
This
for your
was a pleasure
time.
presentation and so.
See you at the Killam presentation, I guess, in
I
a few
would
weeks.
imagine we'll see a couple of you next Wednesday. So, all right. Speaking of next Wednesday, the next item on the agenda is future agendas. I think I mentioned this outline four meetings. We did school this week. The project managers for the schedule worked out such that the week to have the big projects was next week, March 5th. So we'll have people, including I think project managers in attendance for both Killam and Recal to come talk to us. And then we will resume with the town budget the following week and presumably finish that and cover the warrant articles, any other financial warrant articles the following week. So.
So no, and a quick question, no voting next week, correct? Just attendance and
You're thinking about zooming in?
I would more than likely resume.
Okay, all right, that's fine. We'll let that slide.
But I will couch it and I can watch
Yes,
it.
no, it's
later.
the fourth and final meeting when we vote on every line in the budget is the one where you know, if
We'll,
you,
we'll just disconnect you.
if you happen to lose, right, if you happen to lose, like, I was like, Jackie, can you make me a host? Hold on, I'm just gonna, oh, it looks like this person disconnected now. Alright, that's a shame. Yeah, seriously, I think, actually, I'm pretty sure, I think, last year for the votes, I was out with the flu, and I believe Endry did the service, he voluntarily disconnected,
Yes.
which, thank you for your service. So yeah, hopefully we,
Sorry to be obtuse. So the 5th is Recal Killam.
correct,
The 12th is town
is town part one,
stuff.
First half.
And 19 is town part 2 voting.
yep, and anything else that's financial in the warrant.
Great.
So then nothing on the 26th, and then something on possibly the 2nd, I think is what Matt.
Yes, so that's worth mentioning, it's not, I guess technically it's a future agenda because we'll presumably post for it, but on April 2nd, which is a Wednesday, I hadn't thought about that it's our time slot, but yes, we thankfully won't be meeting by then. Matt Cornelis is trying to organize a
pseudo financial
it's a
forum that isn't a forum.
It's a forum about big financial things, but it's not, we're not being asked to put it on. And it's going to be at the PAC, trying to get a lot of people in to hear more about Killam and Recal.
Pre-town, so it's the like pre-town meeting.
It's kind of a pre-town meeting, exactly.
But my understanding is town meeting has to put debt exclusions for each one on the ballot, so it's a wait, right?
Well, so it's
There's gonna be a special town meeting at the start.
Yes.
we're getting into the mechanics of this, which I think we will be discussing next week.
Right,
So
but that's why we're having that's a way to educate the public and have them ask a lot of their questions and town meeting members.
Right, I mean, that's true, and yeah, it is, I mean, the select board has already voted to call an election for both of these. Even though town meeting has not yet voted to authorize any debt for these. Presumably, the election becomes a very moot point if town meeting doesn't approve the debts.
But
I
it
actually
still,
asked that- I
it
actually-
still has to occur.
But the election will still occur, which would be a super weird election.
Yes,
So be
I-
an
I- 'cause
election with
because
no
I
debt?
actually asked that question in our Killam meeting.
Yeah.
We will, even if town meeting votes, doesn't pass it.
No.
And the town could still pass it. And then we would just have to have another town meeting.
Then we hold another town meeting, okay, that's a good point, and then it would be, cause we'd be, the town wouldn't yet be authorized to take out the debt, but if you held a special town meeting a couple weeks later, you could fix that, and it would be a weird world in which the town had voted for something and the town meeting still said never mind. So, yeah, get it, but that would still be bad, because I understand that part of the timeline is being driven by, there are cost savings in starting sooner, so.
Yeah, I didn't give it as part of my liaison, and I'm sure whether it's Carla or.
That's right, your liaison update is the excuse for we could say, well, I just say this is on topic for the meeting.
Right, exactly.
Trying not to talk about things that are not on the agenda.
Yeah,
But
no,
yes.
I didn't go through it on the liaison report, but I've been, kind of super impressed with the professionalism of Colliers, the OPM, and LBA from the designer. They're working great together, but a lot, and Carla has been, kind of running point on a lot of this, is trying to figure out, like, there's so many moving parts. They're even talking about moving the modulars, and trying to figure out timeframes, and trying to milk out as much time as possible so that we can have the school be finished, kind of on time, even early, on budget, and then and have the students start, kind of and kind of transition over. Yeah, so it's been really, kind of impressive, and there's a lot of places where there's opportunities to save money as well, and that's been, kind of really refreshing, in that you have people that are not part of the town thinking about spending money judiciously and conservatively on that side. So it's been really great. They've listened to what's important. I think we've done a good job of, kind of communicating, and the community and the abutters and so forth have talked, quite a bit about what's important. We spent a lot of time on traffic, we spent a lot of time on a lot of aspects of it. So it's been it's been, you know, kind of a really helpful thing, but I would, I would recommend for next week, kind of asking questions to dive into that. From a committee perspective is, asking a lot of questions as far as even some of the things we talked about during the liaison report, as far as where the savings come from, some of the and the scheduling, because I think there's a lot of great things. I think that's the best way for us to help educate anyone that's going to be watching, is by asking those types of questions.
That makes me think of the question that we got. There was a question posed to Marianne and I about sort of how much from the OPM, but how much detail we wanted. And, my response was basically as much as we can fit in the time. We don't want to be here till midnight and we've got two big projects to talk about.
Yep.
But that, my experience with this committee is that we will eat up as much detail as you give us and we will ask questions about it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's probably, you're probably better off getting more ahead of time, and then, maybe it's the summary that you get in the presentation, but, the more information that we have to, to kind of dive into it, I think it'll be, I think everyone should be, I've been, again, especially as someone that's not, I know nothing about buildings, you know what I mean, but the whole permanent building committee, they're excellent. We're lucky to have them, but kind of hearing as an outsider some of the exchanges that kind of happen between the experts, on the committee and the OPM and the designer has been fascinating, especially talking about the geothermal piece of it, where you, like, we're getting down to like where you put the wells, how far apart are they, talking about solar. So there's a lot of different pieces there to that. So there's a lot to, for folks to dig into.
Very good. Like on the contingency, right? Well, I can ask this next week, but material costs, like, can we protect ourselves anyway there, or?
I doubt it. I mean, that's just, and again, this is completely, my opinion and nothing that's based in any kind of fact. I just think, you're gonna be subject to whatever happens when you start to build. Kind of Mike has mentioned that, you try to build in as many things as possible, kind of flexibility, within the budget, but you can't predict the future, and you don't know.
So
I mean, who
hoping you
knows?
lock in the labor.
Yeah, who knows how it goes by the time we actually break ground. You know what I mean? And where we need steel beams and or whatever else we are kind of putting in there. But there's been a lot of questions from the committee about the sustainability of the materials and how tight the envelope is, and it's been really kind of. I mean, and they're drilling down to that level of like, the window's shape and functionality and everything. So it's the amount of detail that's in there is pretty impressive. But I think there's, to that question, I think it's really hard. And again, 3 months ago, you wouldn't have thought that, we'd be having, we'd have
You may have
this.
thought about it differently.
Yeah, you would have thought about it, differently about like, okay, well, would we have tariffs on steel? You just didn't know. So, and who knows where that's gonna go in 6, I think everything's so fluid, so.
Right.
So I'm trying to stick to future agenda topics. Is there some time before the May vote where we as a finance committee are going to be able to give the town a fair picture of expected, to the extent we know, expected town budgets and a timeline for when another override might hit before these votes? I'm very concerned about that because I remember what happened when there was the 2012 and 2014 library votes. And then in 2016, the town went for a first override. There were a number of reasons why that override might not have passed, but there were a fair number of people who expressed a concern. Why didn't we know about this coming when it was the 2014 debt exclusion vote? And eventually, that override got scaled way back for 2018. The town has done a good job making it last, but if in 2028, we are gonna be coming you know, we've seen the run rate on our free cash supplementing the budget. We're hearing about health insurance increases. I don't know where this fits in, because there isn't another financial forum. I don't think we can just hijack next week's meeting. I don't know if it's the time for the
I
second.
would-
When would that fit in before May 13th? That
I would
we
say.
can talk about this.
I'm sorry for jumping in, Joe. I would think that's Matt's meeting. You know, the one before, what's August 2nd or 5th or whatever.
We
No,
will
April,
get,
what is it,
yeah.
August?
It's, you mean it's Matt's to do, or Matt's meeting is the time to do it?
I think Matt's meeting would be the time to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think that's probably for, you know, leadership to be able to massage that message to Matt as far as you may
Yeah.
want to feather that in as the.
We're gonna get asked, you
Yeah,
know.
so we're, I mean, the first, the place where we hear about it, because we've heard bits and pieces and Sharon sent you and I the scary health insurance numbers. Spoiler alert.
She's told some select board members too, so I think it's out, kind of out there and.
No, it's, you can publicly request the emails from Sharon, sure, whatever. Anyway, the point is, that health insurance numbers are coming in way over projection for FY '26, and
And
so.
they're doing that in every other town, we're like in better shape. I mean, Winchester already acknowledged that their health insurance numbers are 20% higher. So we're not that bad, but, you know,
Yes, it's something
even if
like-
you scale it down, it's
Yeah,
not good.
so-
And then as I've told some people here, does anyone wanna guess how much an override Stoneham is asking for? Okay, $14.6 million in April. And now that's after North Reading failed at 10 million and Melrose failed at 7.5. Those are peer towns, and maybe we're in better shape than them. But if we're looking at something double
So just the high school,
digit,
I was gonna say, like,
Just to the high
that's
school.
I know,
talking
if
about
we're looking
stacking
at
an override after
something
a,
double
alright.
digit in a few years, that doesn't mean it's gonna pass.
Yeah,
But
so,
we have to,
so in terms of future agendas,
that should be it's somewhere in the mix.
So can you just say, what's the rough number for health now that you started that? So,
I think she said something like 13%, and she planned for 7 when,
okay.
7.1 or something like 7 point something. And I might be wrong, it might be 8, but in any case, it was a single digit number was planned, a double digit number has come in, low double digits, so better than other places, but still. So there's you know, and Sharon is doing the Sharon thing and finding other places to, you know, move money around so that she doesn't have to immediately turn around and ask us for the entire shortfall out of free cash. But some asking is gonna happen. And we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, of course. But regardless of how we decide to handle it, the overall situation of benefits costs going up again, we got, I was looking back at this, by the way, benefits costs were like only going up like 3 to 5% a year for 5 years there or something, which is part of why this job has seemed way easier than it actually is.
But remember before all this, when Bob Alessia was town manager and there were these 8% increases and the town was debating whether or not to join some certain pool, and then we didn't join it and worked out and the pool was higher, and I don't know if that's still an
Is
option.
that coming back? I don't know.
But costs, we know costs are going up,
Yeah,
and this is
so-
just one typical thing, we know trash is gonna go up.
So getting back to the like, I think we should plan to hear about this first and learn and discuss it ourselves in 2 weeks from now. That is also going to be the public hearing on the budget, and I think we can and should make sure that gets announced in more than just the statutory minimal ad in the you know, Chronicle or whatever. I would, you know, certainly welcome the public to that. The public's always welcome, but that one's gonna be interesting. And then, yeah, the forum on the 2nd, unclear exactly how we'll be involved, but by then we'll know a lot more, and that will be all about trying to communicate what we know out.
Well, I think there's gonna be, you know, calculators of, you know, this debt exclusion would cost the average house this much, this debt exclusion, because Sharon presented numbers at the select board meeting.
Yep.
But then we would say, you know, just like they had override calculators, in a few years, you know, this other.
Yeah.
We have to tell the public that, because otherwise they'll just wonder, maybe it won't be as bad, but the public has to know.
But should we be telling, who should we be telling though, Matt or Sharon? Should we assume that they know? Because it sounds like we want a discussion of free cash, right?
Well, yeah,
Sharon
I
to
mean,
give a projected
if we
free
just
cash
say, look,
flows.
we've been, you know, this year, someone will see, it's like 5.6 million, and the percentage you know, we had to ask everyone to come down on what percent. And next year, it may be, look, you can only have your budgets go up 1.5% instead of 3.5%, and I'm making that up. But then they all have to deal with that. We had years where it was like that,
Yeah.
you know? And we survived, but it's just something,
You know, 100%.
it's part of the business cycle, so somehow that's, if it's not on our agenda and it's in that meeting.
No, our guidance to the town was to use $5.8 million of free cash, and they're gonna come back and ask in 2 weeks about 6 million, so an additional 200,000. And we're not having that conversation now, but we will have it in 2 weeks. And then whatever falls out of the conversation will probably have implications for what, you know, to tell people on April 2nd as well. So, I mean, this is, you know, looking ahead and planning and being prepared is what we're doing, and that's good. So. Anything else? Obviously, there's a lot on future agendas, but is there anything else that needs to be included in future agendas? Good, because already our plate is already full.
Right, I just was, we're not gonna in light of all of these things, I think we had talked about revisiting policies of what percentage of free cash to keep and percent, I
Yeah.
don't think that this is the time for that.
No, I mean, it's a policy discussion around, we do one weird thing, and I understand the history is that like, before the last override, the amount of money we had in the bank was so small that it didn't matter if it was in stabilization fund or free cash, because there wasn't any. But that built back up after the override, and theoretically, your stabilization fund is supposed to, your buffer and your free cash is the stuff that you spend on whatever. But that's not actually, we have a token amount in the stabilization fund, and all the money is in free cash. The vast majority of the town's, you know, liquid resources there. So, you know, the question earlier was like, should we actually put the money that we want to have as the buffer in the stabilization fund? Which, you know, if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, but it is curious we do it that way, and I'm certainly up for talking with Sharon more at future meetings about why it is that way and what the implications would be of you know, actually putting some money in the savings account and not just keeping it all in the checking account, so to speak.
I think the reason why we wanna know how much we wanna keep in there, because I know with regard to the debt exclusions, I've heard people's suggestion, well, maybe with recalc, an alternate way to finance it if it doesn't pass in May would be take some out of free cash and somehow have it in the levy and have a smaller project, cause they, you know, Killam is what it is. Senior Center, I've watched the Council on Aging meetings and they talk about, well, if it fails, we're back to the drawing board, and
What if it fails? Sounds like a great topic for the discussion next week.
yeah, no,
and,
that's, but I'm
there's a pattern
saying,
here.
how we set up a policy of free cash would impact how people
Potentially
think
impact
of,
that. No, I think
how
that's a
people
good-
theorize
I
about
think,
financing it.
You know, when we get back to the town budget 2 weeks from now, and Sharon comes in with the bad news about the health insurance and asks us to discuss what to do about it. I think it's also fair to ask for I will ask about an updated free cash projection spreadsheet.
I think that's a wise choice.
You know, because that's the and then that, you know, it should likewise be, you know, because that spreadsheet probably will show things that people don't like.
I think it would be good too to get, we've talked about this, there's been like a number of these over the last, like, so now it's health insurance, it was gas, what was it?
Natural gas.
Natural gas,
gas.
which,
We have rubbish.
yep,
You know,
And-
so it would
and
be good
WRA
to
was
see these, you know, kind of like a series of inflection points that have, you know, kind of hijacked, you know, some of these budgets, and they come at different times. But I think it would be, you know, it'd be interesting to say, you know, to have that as a, you know, as a talking track around, not only are these happening, they're going from single digits to double digits, but we're seeing these at a greater frequency, you know, as well. So like, all of these things are indicators that, you know, we're heading in a direction that, if you play this out and you just say that, well, there's another line item that'll happen next year and maybe two the year after that, and then what that does to free cash and,
Right, so that just, and that has impacts on budgets. I guess, will we have time to get to that with town budget discussions? I mean, maybe it.
I mean, we'll have as much time as we need to answer Sharon's question about whether she can have $200,000.
Yep.
Like, we should, that's a big question.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
we
town
will-
meeting votes it, right? Or is she asking for our reserves?
Well, I mean, it would go in the, no, not asking for reserves. Although there is also a reserve request that I think will come up. I
Snow and
can't
ice.
remember if that's next week or the one after. But Matt did send a reserve request.
Yeah, I think I saw that, so.
Which is,
Snow.
there was snow removal and, oh, I forget off the top of my head what the other ones were. Hold on. I can actually probably find this in my email.
I thought
Oh, no,
the
actually, I
snow
know
was
where to
just a
find it.
change in the.
And this is gonna be a future agenda item, so it's, I just need to find it in my
Playing
drive.
fast and loose with this agenda item right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is actually, we really are talking about like, do we need to have a free cash discussion on March 12th? Yes, that is a question of the agenda for March 12th. Nobody say what they think, but we can say whether or not we're gonna talk about it. Yes, we're gonna talk about it. All right,
Joe, are you gonna send an updated spreadsheet of the free cash?
oh, well, that's
Okay.
actually, I'm gonna ask Sharon to send that to all of us. Cause I have an updated financial forecast.
Elections.
Oh, that's right, there were election related expenses.
That's why they want
Okay.
money.
All right, there's a free cash, yes, there's gonna be a, thank you, got it quicker than me. So yes, at one of our, I can't remember, oh yeah, March 5th. So next week on our agenda will be a reserve request that is some snow removal but it's mostly actually election expenses. And I will not comment on that because that would be next week's discussion. Is there anything else to add to next week's agenda? Reserve request. No, all right, cool.
Joe, for like 2 weeks after that though?
Yep.
It's tied to the agenda, but can we request like how the town presents the information? Like that they'll have the scorecards and the FTEs? Because sometimes in the past, like it's been like inconsistent the way they present it by department and it's confusing to follow. I don't know if you guys.
It might be too late at this.
Yeah,
time-
well, it's probably late at this point to
but
get it
next
into
year,
the-
bro.
It's probably, we're gonna just get a mini rehashing of what they presented to the select board in December. That's usually what we get, and sometimes we don't even get that level of
yeah.
detail,
We'll
right?
get the,
Even
we
that
will
was-
get the budget though, we'll get the budget
Yeah,
doc.
yeah.
Yeah, but what they
Which
did
the
in
select board
December was
didn't
like
get in
inconsistent though.
December.
Like it
Yeah,
was-
and
Yeah,
there's
so
not
this will
always
be, no, I
as
think
many
that's,
line items.
I think that's a really good idea, and I suspect, but I mean, I would suggest, we could certainly reach out to Matt. We could talk to Matt about it at the meeting, and we can reach out to him outside of a meeting, of course, any of us can. You're certainly welcome to, I can if you want me to. But maybe it's best actually to talk about it when we're looking at it, to be like, this should look like that.
Okay.
Because I agree, I thought the presentation of, from today's discussion, I thought the presentation of FTEs was useful for understanding. Sometimes I was doing that math in the past, or just like guessing what the salary is and dividing, but like that's
We've been through so many finance directors in like the last 8 years, and everyone has a different style. It's really interesting, and the amount of information you got
Yeah.
from each of them.
yeah.
So,
for the-
but-
on the school side, on the town side, we still have Sharon. Yay! All right. Okay. Let's keep moving with this agenda. It's almost 9.
So we get to that.
The meeting minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes from the October 30th, 2024 meeting as presented with thanks to Jackie.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? It's been 1,000 years.
Is it really the last time we met?
Yeah. I mean, there were,
Town meeting.
entire
Yeah.
holiday seasons and, flu outbreaks and some stuff happened at national levels. A few things have happened since the end of October. So, yeah.
I guess gonna take the vote. You got your second, and if anyone has any comments.
Nope. All right. Let's do it. Roll call vote. Mark,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Marianne,
Yes.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Andre,
Yes,
John,
Yes.
and Joe, yes. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Jeffrey. Mark,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Emily,
Yep.
Marianne,
Yep.
Jeffrey,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Andre,
yes.
John,
Yes.
and Joe, yes. Thank you all. See you next week.
Can you say that?